Welcome to African Freedom News. African Freedom News for people who want to survive and thrive. This is our premiere show, so I'm real excited about it, and we're hoping that people find this really helpful. We found that although there's a lot of shows on the internet about with the news and about survival skills and things like that. There's really not a lot that puts it all together and makes a lot of sense or is representative of people of African descent, Black folks. And so this is something that Erin and I wanted to do. Welcome. I'm Nzinga Dalila.
And I'm Aaron Olinger.
And we're really glad you're here. This is our first show, so it might be kind of slow and a little kind of awkward as we move back and forth through some screens. But again, we hope you get a lot out of this. This show, again, is about news and news that's relevant, current news that's relevant about survival and about how we as people of African descent can thrive these current difficult times and future impending difficulties that we may be facing, but not only how we're going to survive, but how we're going to thrive these times. So we're going to talk about news, and we're going to talk about some skills to help you learn to survive. And we're also going to talk about some things to kind of make you think about how you can get mentally and emotionally and psychologically prepared to survive. Because I'm sure, as Aaron will probably tell you so many times, I mean, really survival is more about, getting your mind together and prepared than it is about just collecting objects. So what we're going to do, and I'm going to switch screens. Hopefully this is going to work. Let's see. So we're going to start off, we try to find some current articles or reports that we found on the internet that have some really relevant information to talk about. And this first one is something that we found on the internet by a report by the Alliance for Science, dated April 22nd. And the title is Global Pandemic Previews Climate Impacts on Food System. So let that open up. And is that scrolling for you, Aaron? Just want to make sure.
No, I'm still on the climate pandemic title.
Okay, let me get back to it. Thank you. Let me get back to the right place. I see. Okay. Is that one? Let's see. Is this one scrolling?
No. Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay. All righty. So let me go. I'm going to go over this. Just bear with me, and then we're going to talk about it. As COVID-19 pandemic sweeps across the planet, it has exposed fragilities in the global food system that are likely to worsen with climate change. This is a story told in vivid images of dairy farmers dumping milk, empty supermarket shelves, piles of vegetables rotting in the sun, long lines at food distribution centers, and water buffalo feasting on strawberries that cannot reach market. It's a very human story of loss, suffering, and uncertainty as farmers face the specter of ruined crops and livelihoods, and the poor fear starvation and hunger as lockdowns and unemployment make it challenging to buy food. For those who have been following the escalation of climate change impacts as the global temperature creeps steadily upward, It's also a prescient tale offering a poignant preview of the unfolding suffering we can expect if we fail to reduce the fossil fuel-driven carbon emissions that are heating the planet to levels unknown in human history. Experts agree that the disruptions currently before us are due not to food shortages, but panic buying and distribution problems, rigid supply chains that are unable to quickly adapt as air, ship, and trucking constraints stymie shipments, borders tighten, produce markets shutter, processing facilities shut down, COVID outbreaks force the closure of massive meat packing plants, and consumers shift from dining in restaurants and schools to almost exclusively at home. But a longer-term food crisis is looming as border closures prevent millions of migrant workers from reaching fields and food production facilities. Farmers struggle to secure fertilizer and seeds. Trade restrictions increase the fragility of supply chains. China scoops up foreign agricultural supplies as it emerges from lockdown and seeks to rebuild its economy and consumers, especially those in import-dependent nations, feel the pinch of rising prices. The world's poorest people are likely to bear the brunt. As the Global Network Against Food Crisis noted in a new report released yesterday, some 135 million people across 55 countries experienced acute food insecurity in 2019, including 75 million children who were stunted and another 17 million who suffered from wasting. The pandemic is perpetuating the downward cycle for millions. The report noted, although the precise magnitude of the deterioration is not yet known. Already, researchers have found that climate change has affected yields in many places, though crop yields have increased in some locations. Overall, there's been a reduction in the global production of staples such as rice and wheat, with climate change shrinking food supplies, particularly in food insecure developing countries. Similarly, a 2018 report by the United Nations Food Agricultural Organization noted that Earth's changing climate and an increase in extreme climate events such as droughts, floods, intense storms, and unpredictable rain patterns are key drivers behind the rise in hunger due to deleterious effects on staple crops such as wheat, rice, and maize. Another new study modeled the impact of a modern-day Dust Bowl, assessing what might happen if the pattern of droughts and poor farming practices that devastated the United States cereal-producing regions in the 1930s were repeated today. The world's food supply has become much more interconnected in the intervening 90 years, with the U.S. Great Plains region exporting cereal crops around the globe and some 80% of the world's population residing in countries that import more food calories than they export. The results of the computer simulation were not pretty, predicting cascading shocks that would reverberate around the world. But drought and floods aren't the only factors poised to destroy grain crops. A study published in the journal Science predicted that these same staples will be greatly impacted by the intensified insect pest pressure expected to accompany climate change. And we're seeing that today. The warmer temperatures will deliver a double whammy by helping insect populations to thrive and also accelerating insect pests' metabolic rate, prompting them to consume more food during their lifespan. As a result, the study projects a 50 to 100% increase in pest-induced crop losses in European wheat and 30 to 40% increases in losses of North American maize, corn. 11 European countries are predicted to see 75% or higher increases in insect-induced wheat losses, including the United Kingdom, Denmark, Sweden, and Ireland. That translates into insect-induced losses of about 16 million tons annually in Europe's breadbasket, currently the most productive wheat-producing region in the world. Farmers in the United States, who grow most of the world's maize crop, are projected to experience losses of more than 20 million tons annually. And China, which grows 1/3 of the global rice crop, could suffer insect-induced losses topping 27 million tons annually. Another paper published in Nature found that climate change also will affect global markets by reshaping agricultural trading patterns. Quote, some regions may not be able to battle climate impacts on agriculture, in which case production of key commodities will decline or shift to new regions, the study's authors reported. So I'm going to stop. I know that's a lot, and actually it goes on a little longer, but we're going to stop right there because I just wanted to go over and give you kind of the overview of the connection between the pandemic, our COVID-19 pandemic, and climate change, and how we can start to maybe see some of that even now in our food production. So what are your thoughts about this, Aaron?
Well, I agree 100% with what you just read. A lot of people are short-sighted. They don't see that far down the road to see how climate change is going to affect us. A lot of the plants that we grow today for food production are designed to be grown in particular climate and particular zones because of temperature. And with increasing temperature around the world heating up due to climate change, some of those areas can become too hot or could cause unstable weather patterns, such as droughts or heat waves, where those crops will not grow properly. In a flood type situation we saw last year in 2019, a lot of our wheat basket was under what they call bomb cyclone storms that left the fields that we would grow wheat in totally flooded out, where the crops were ruined. We saw late in the summer, the heat waves that we dealt with caused a lot of crops in the fields to shrivel up because they couldn't take that intense heat, and we was having unpredictable rain patterns at that point. So, and for the guy on the street that would wonder, well, how is climate change going to affect me? It's going to directly affect your pocketbook. As supply shortens, this planet that we live on is increasing in population every year, and that's going unchecked. That's a lot of mouths have to feed, and people have a powerful need to have to eat every day. So when you start seeing supplies of food get short, prices are going to go up. So that's going to immediately impact your wallet. Last year around Thanksgiving time, because of the unpredictable weather due to climate change, we saw a lot of people, or a lot of stores rather, we witnessed higher prices on meat, vegetables, as well as fruit. And I heard a lot of people complaining about how expensive turkey was, or how expensive meat or vegetables were. Well, it's going to get worse before it gets better, because again, as the population grows and we're not taking care of the planet and taking care of the ecosystem, as those begin to fail, food production is going to be directly impacted. It's going to be higher prices to us. It's going to mean product disruptions. And when you add COVID-19 to it, where, like you said, borders are closing, no one's transporting products between nations. Now those products that you were used to receiving, that you can just go to a store every day, are now going to begin to get short, which that cause, once people realize the shortages are occurring, an after effect is the panic buying. People will go out and buy everything they could get. It becomes survival of the fittest. They start thinking more me than the group as a whole. And that causes shortages on products that are out there that you're trying to purchase on your day-to-day life to make it. So if you
And
look
you,
in,
I was just wondering when you were talking about the closing down borders and not getting produce, and when I was reading that article, and I didn't even realize, how certain things that I eat every day aren't even grown here, and that the climate change, the droughts, the changes in weather that could destroy the production of food, over across the ocean or something, is going to impact my diet and what I eat.
Right. And I agree 100% with you on that. And again, when that panic buying starts, you're going to start seeing long lines of people trying to get in. You'll know that the food supply chain is broken when they start rationing products. They'll tell you one per customer, two per customer. When you see that, they're trying to basically help everyone be able to get a little bit of something. But that would be your first indication that the supply chain is broken. The just-in-time system is starting to fail or has failed. And in the future, any products that are made outside the country, once the borders are closed, those shortages and those product disruptions are going to begin to happen. And the only way you're going to be able to have products at that point is, one, to be able to have the foresight to see ahead, to be able to buy ahead a little at a time within your budget.
And
And
that
two,
and that just in time, that means, just for people who don't understand, that our grocery stores are the places where we go to buy things, Walmart, wherever you go, they don't have like a warehouse in the back room somewhere with stuff piled up high, up to the ceiling. They only have enough products in that facility for a certain group of people in that demographic area to have for about 3 days. Is that kind of what just in time is? That's how I kind of understand it.
for most grocery stores, that's what they keep on hand, is enough products to supply a body of people over a 72-hour period. But as we've seen during winter months, if they say there's a snowstorm coming, people rush to the store and they buy bread, eggs, milk, and you go there and you find shortages or empty shelves because people are out panic buying. Again, to buy ahead, to have foresight to buy ahead and set up a food pantry in your home is going to be vital. And then two, maintaining a certain amount of cash in your home so that when these type situations develop, you'll have an emergency fund in place to be able to help get you through the situation. But the higher prices are going to eat up your savings. That people are going to have to make a choice between buying food or paying bills. And that's a sad position to have to be in. But some foods that you were used to eating, you may not be able to afford no more.
Well, don't you think that's happening now with the COVID-19 and people not being able to work or being furloughed and on unemployment? And now there's already shortages in meat, and with panic buying that, when I go to the store, I see on shelves only two, you can only get two of these and things like that.
Right. I mean, the COVID-19 is going to change the world as we know it. Certain things are not going to go back to being the way they were. And until the shortages are overcome, you will be under a rationing system probably until further notice. And as things get more and more short, there'll be more and more rationing. And it's going to go beyond just meat or whatever. It could be toothpaste, it could be shoes, it could be any products that are made outside this country that we're not getting in here right now. Those shortages are going to occur.
And that's almost everything.
Right. And then going back to what you said about water, temperature, extreme weather, and things due to climate change expecting, I guess, affecting food. Temperature to me is one of the key things because you're looking at drought situations. There's only two things that in a drought situation that proliferate, and that's weeds and insects. And those insects, without cold weather to knock down their population numbers, mosquitoes, ticks, different things that carry disease proliferate. Even right now, we have this murder hornet that's inside the country right now, and it feeds on honeybees. We need those bees to pollinate our crops. as they begin to proliferate with no natural predators over here, if they cannot eradicate them, you can expect the cost of honey to probably double to even quadruple in price. Because as the bees get scarcer, that honey price is going to go up, and I expect to see that be impacted probably over the summer months of this year.
Well,
So again,
so there's like a chain, so that the change in the climate creates a change in the ways that insects either reproduce or die off, or they don't. Then they travel, and if they negatively impact, our bees, and that we need in order to grow our crops, that's just another increasing cycle of how our food system is going to deteriorate. Is that correct? Because we need honeybees. People don't realize that.
yeah, I mean, Einstein, I believe, said that uh, if mankind was eliminated from the earth, the bees could continue to live. But if the bees were eliminated from the earth, it could possibly mean our extinction, because we need those pollinators, pollinate the trees and the vegetables so that we can have food to live on. But another thing that goes with temperature is disease. I mean, there's different types of diseases that proliferate in extreme heat. So when I hear people say that COVID-19 will be eliminated by the heat of the summer, it's already hot in India right now. It's hot down in Mississippi, Atlanta, Louisiana, Florida. That disease is still spreading there. So I don't know if that's a false narrative that's being put out there to keep panic down, but temperatures, especially extreme heat, disease, insects, and weeds proliferate, and all three of those things can affect our food chain.
Wow.
That food chain is very, very fragile, and COVID-19 right now is showing us how easily that food chain can be broken.
And and I was freaking out when I saw the hordes of locusts, in Africa and ravaging those countries. And it's not like there's there's some kind of insects don't just stay, like there's some kind of border and they don't go anywhere else. I mean, they get done doing whatever they're doing there. Who's not to say that they go up to Europe, and then, however things spread, I mean, it just, and I know that this stuff can sound really scary and overwhelming, but we also are going to talk about being prepared, because you can't be prepared if you don't know what's coming. And that's kind of the point of this. I mean, we're not sitting around, just having conversations about how horrible things are. We also need to talk about what can we do? So,
Right.
I mean, did you have any other thoughts about?
Well, I wanted to mention one other thing. Soil itself is a living material. I mean, a farmer totally counts on that soil to be in great shape. And again, global warming directly impacts the condition of that soil. And due to poor farming methods, like you said in your article, and probably with drought, you can have another Dust Bowl situation without very much effort whatsoever.
Yeah, I read one article said we have, and this was a couple of years ago, saying scientists estimate that we have maybe about 60 years left of soil.
And I could believe that, because right now the soil has to be cared for, has to be fertilized, whatever. And any farmer can tell you that his topsoil is vital when he's planting those seeds for that proper germination for those plants to be able to grow. And if a Dust Bowl situation happens and your topsoil is blowing away as dust, you're not going to be able to grow anything. And again, it greatly affects production. For the guy on the street, it's going to mean higher prices. It's going to mean hunger. And no one should have to want to face that. So this is a very real threat to everyone, whether they want to believe that this is going to affect them or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And the large industrial agricultural companies, I mean, they're not caring about, they're really not. I mean, we can pull up some articles maybe in previous shows, but I mean, most people, I think, can pretty much figure out they're not like trying to make sure that our soil is viable, it's sustainable. They're more concerned about how they can yield the biggest crops and using pesticides and herbicides and whatever, and just tearing up the ecosystem.
And
Um,
I'd like to add one more thing to that too.
yeah,
Right now around the planet, we're having what they call deforestation. And that's where they're totally stripping the forests down, burning them down, getting rid of them to create more farmland that they can grow crops on. But that greatly damages the ecosystem that's fragile, because those plants in the forest and those trees, they take in CO2, and CO2 is what's actually driving the global warming and driving up the temperatures, the
yes,
rise of CO2. Those trees and things take in that CO2 and they give off oxygen. And as they say in the rule of three, you can only go 3 minutes without air. I mean, everyone has a powerful need to have to be able to breathe. And you're cutting down the very thing that's working as a filter, that's filtering CO2 out for the sake of making more food. When that's actually the wrong thing to do.
yeah.
I just
That,
wanted to
yeah.
mention that.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. Yeah, and one of the things that as we go on in the show, we're going to try to talk more and more and help to educate people more and more about how climate change occurs, and that, you know, so that, you know, because I think people get confused about the difference between weather and climate. So they think, well, you know, it's cold, so what are people talking about global warming? I don't get it, you know. And we're going to talk more about that. If you think about it, the whole planet is has a delicate balance. For us Homo sapiens to live, the whole planet has to be in a delicate balance of shifting temperatures. And when that gets off kilter, and places become too hot, some places become too cold, and and nothing can live. And so, like we were kind of talking about with this article, crops change, insects, life changes, and it makes it so incredibly difficult for us. So again, like I said, you know, one of the things that we're going to talk about is, you know, what can we do, and how does this, what is all this stuff, what's this got to do with me, and because if you just think about how bad things are, you can become overwhelmed and frightened, and you know, when you feel overwhelmed, you just freeze and you don't do anything. And you know, if you're in danger and you don't do anything, well, then that's really bad. I'm just leave it that, and you can figure out what's going to happen if something bad's coming and you just freeze or stick your head in the sand. So part of what we're going to do and is kind of shift gears a little bit, and in every show we're going to have some time to do a little bit of education on thriving and surviving. And if I can get things to switch a little bit again, hopefully this time. Sorry about this. So, am I not there? Okay. So I'm calling this segment "Learning to Survive" with Erin Olinger. And Erin, I'd really appreciate it if you kind of, in case people don't know you, um, to talk a little bit about who you are and what this segment is about.
Okay, my name's Aaron Olinger. I've been training in survival and basically preparedness field since I was 4 years old. Every year I take classes to try to further my education and knowledge in different areas. And today I'd like to speak to you a little bit about the work around this COVID-19 situation with food shortages that are going on and the best strategy that I feel to take at this time. Uh, Knowing that there is going to be product interruptions, knowing that there will be product shortages, I think everyone should take the time to take a look at the country of origin of the products that you use, whether it's toilet paper, toothpaste, it could be aspirin, it could be any meds, food, uh, clothing, any type of material. If it's made outside this country, and if this pandemic lasts, say, 2 years or longer, I think it'd be a wise decision to go out and buy ahead on some items. Have have the ability to see into the future a little bit, ask yourself a question, what if? And what can I do to counter that what if scenario, looking at the worst case imaginable. And right now, knowing that they're talking about meat shortages and food shortages, you have it in your budget to where you can fill up your freezer or go out and acquire you a sort of small 4-foot deep freeze or something that you can stock up with meat. And that is if you're a meat eater. I would definitely stock that up with different meat and different foods so that as the shortages occur and people are out there panic buying, you're not out there pushing and shoving, fighting over rolls of toilet paper or different products like that. You fought ahead. You didn't have to go out there and be in that mess. And then a second thing I would like to say, along with stocking meat or other clothing products or medicines, I think it would be important, not knowing what the future holds, to put you together a seed bank, have the ability to grow food. You can buy pots in different sizes from 4-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch pots, and even larger. And if you have the ability, you can also acquire 5-gallon buckets, containers that you can grow food in yourself. Not only will you know the quality of the food that you're eating, but you'll know what type of pesticides are on it. Because food is actually the medicine for your body. And if your body has proper nutrition, you're going to get the optimal performance from it. Now, one of the things that I've done is I went out and purchased a food bank. This is what they call the Producers by Humble Seed. You can find them online. They run about, I say, $35 to maybe $50, depending upon how many packets of seeds. As you can see, it's filled with about 27 packets of seeds. They're hermetically sealed in what I believe to be Mylar bag envelopes. These seeds will keep for an extended period of time. And if something was to happen where the food chain became totally broken, this would give me the ability to be able to grow my own food. And it's just a seed bank. Very small, takes a very little room on your shelf, but you have the ability to be able to feed your family. Another thing that I've done, I went out and bought a photo album, and the photo albums with the elongated pockets are the best to use. I can open this up. And what I did was I filled inside the pockets with seeds. And as you turn each page, there's a packet of seeds in there for different crops. So when you're living in uncertain times and you do not know what the future is going to hold, the best thing again is to ask yourself, what if this happens? What would I do to be able to have a workaround to get around that? And just being able to be able to grow your own food is going to be vital. A few bags of dirt, some containers, and the right seeds, and you've got a good start on being able to feed your family and feed yourself and grant your family proper nutrition. Is one of the workarounds that the government is doing right now is they're creating what they call smart crops, hybrid crops, or I've even seen seeds that were considered to be drought resistant. And for them to do that, they realize that certain areas are turning into deserts or becoming more arid. So they're purposely creating seeds or changing them some kind of way where they can grow in an arid climate. And as far as meat goes, from what I saw here recently, they're coming out with GMO meat that's grown inside a lab. I don't know what type of effect that's going to have on your body. I don't think a good one long term. So to me, if you're able to grow your own livestock, and the easiest livestock to grow is going to be rabbits, bluegills, and chickens. And with the chickens, you get the added benefit of the eggs. The bluegill, I mean, all three of them breed like crazy, and it would give you a renewable meat source if you're a meat eater year after year, and they don't consume as much feed as you would think, and they give off quite a bit of meat. And like I said, with the chickens, you also get the added benefit of the eggs. And being able to raise your own meat source, renewable meat source, being able to have a seed bank or seeds put back to have a renewable food source there, that could be vital to your future of having quality food to eat and not having to eat GMO products that could cause cancer or other health, I say, disadvantages. So I'm going, oh, and I'll show you one other thing too. You can also buy what they call potatoes. Now, these are seed potatoes. Run you about $2 for a bag of them. Potatoes is a good crop that could take you into the winter months, keep a long time. And potatoes, squash, a few other vegetables would get you through your first winter. And potatoes have a lot of nutrients in them. With the different varieties of potatoes, if you have a nice selection on hand, they maintain all the nutrients in them to be able to keep your human body operating efficient. You could also buy onion sets. You get corn, bean. These are sugar snap pea sets here that you can get, seeds. All of those things can go a long ways to being a benefit to your future if you want to have quality food to eat. You get a lot of benefits, great stress relief to be able to work in your garden. You get a lot of emotional benefit out of seeing the food grow and being able to consume it yourself. It's almost therapeutic. So if you haven't started, consider getting a seed bank started. And if you're a meat eater, consider either raising some chickens, because even in an urban environment, some cities will allow you to have between 6 to 8 chickens in an urban setting. So find out what your laws are and what the restrictions are, and consider going around and not being reliant upon the system. Be as self-reliant as you can be. So when the system breaks, it's not going to break you. So I'm going to end at that.
Okay. And, you know, I was, when I was listening to you, you always have a wealth of information. You've been doing this since you were 4, and you're what? That was like 20 years ago. So, but you know, you are, you know, I know you're very modest about your skills. You always, you know, shoot for perfection. And you know, I know that you don't like to brag about what you do and what you know, but you are a wealth of information, and our community is extremely fortunate to have you. I've been thinking about a lot of these things, kind of reading and studying about these things, and had not ever met a brother who could share this information and has a passion to help our community the way you do. So I'm always grateful. And I know you get tired of hearing me say it, but I'm just going to keep saying it. So
I appreciate it.
yeah. I had a thought or a comment. I was thinking that people who watch this, they might think, you know, I don't know how I'm going to do this. But, you know, I was just thinking perhaps families could work together. Maybe if they don't even live together, maybe they could say, well, you know, I'm going to grow tomatoes and you grow squash or whatever, and I'm going to keep some rabbits and you get a big fish tank and, whatever. We're going to stay, we're going to stay fed. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, people just got to think outside the box and think about how can we do this? It's about survival, and so, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add about that. But, the thing is that white folks are doing this. And that's the thing. White folks, they got community, they got groups together, they go out, they practice hunting and shooting and camping and survival skills, and they work together in neighborhoods or whatever. And we got to start doing that. We got to start bringing our groups together and getting organized. So I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to comment on about that.
Mm. Well, I will say again, the key is going to be self-reliance. You don't want to rely on no system. Over the years, technology has changed to the point that we as a people, we've lost our survival skills. Where we were hunter-gatherers at one time, or where our ancestors, even in this country, grew a lot of the crops for this country. Right now, because of technology making it easy, instead of growing you some beans, people say, well, why should I put in the effort when I can just go to a grocery store and buy a can of beans? But conversely, when COVID-19 or something comes along, a disaster comes along that breaks that supply chain, now you're faced with hunger because you don't know how to do anything for yourself anymore. And that's the worst feeling that you could have, is to be man of your house or woman of your house, and your family's looking at you, wondering, what are we going to do? And you don't have any answers. You have no plan in place, and you have set up no preparations for in case things went sideways. That's the worst feeling in the world you could ever have. And I hope nobody has to suffer that. And
So right. You're so right. I can tell you that as soon as I started, prepping, getting stuff together, thinking about and thinking about what I can do to survive, difficult times. It just, the stronger inner strength, I just felt more confident, more secure. I'm still seeing stuff going on and I get worried, but I also know that if I'm worried about something, there's what you call a workaround. There's something, and I just got to figure out what it is. If I can see it coming, that's I just feel so much better emotionally and psychologically. So thank you so much. And that kind of brings us into our next part, which hopefully, if I get this right, I go to the right place. So I am going to talk a little bit. What did I do? Did I lose it again? Okay. So I'm going to talk about learning to thrive. So we talked about, had a little bit of education, a section about surviving, and I'm going to talk about thriving. How do we not only, we don't want to be like The Walking Dead or something, and just kind of, walking around and just trying to feeling like we're like half living. We want to thrive. We want to figure out, how am I going to get through this, and really and still have, and be healthy psychologically, spiritually, physically, have my family, my relationships, our community to continue on through this. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about a few things, and then how we can, some skills that we need to be thinking about in terms of self-sufficiency, psychologically and mentally, like Aaron was referring to. And first of all, I just want to refer to this one article about the future of human climate. And I don't know, I don't know. I think maybe we've talked enough about that. I might not get talked But well, just a little bit. This article did. I guess one of the reasons why I was talking about wanted to get into this a little bit um, is, and I guess I'll just pull it up for a minute, maybe get to it. And I think if I, hopefully I won't make the mistake I did last time and get here. Again, I'm not going to read all of this, but I just want to show you this. It's a report by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America. And they talk about the future of human climate niche. And I'm just going to read this one paragraph, and it's basically kind of summarizes the importance of this report. And it says, we show that for thousands of years, humans have concentrated in a surprisingly narrow subset of Earth's available climates, characterized by mean annual temperatures around 13 degrees centigrade. Now, I want to just stop for a minute and say, okay, what does that mean? Okay, basically for thousands of years, humans, I talked about this balance that the planet is in for Homo sapiens to live. And it's usually been, for us to live, it usually has to be around 13 degrees centigrade. And if you go start reading some of these articles and reports about climate change, the United States, I guess, is one of the only people that keep talking about Fahrenheit. Everybody else talks about Celsius. So they talk about 13 degrees Celsius. And just so you know, 13 degrees Celsius is about 54 degrees. So just, give or take, for human beings to live and flourish and, around there, some places colder, some places hotter, but that's kind of the mean. And so, but this report then goes on to say that we demonstrate that depending on scenarios of population growth, which we talked about earlier, and warming, over the coming 50 years, 1 to 3 billion people are projected to be left outside the climate conditions that have served humanity well over the past 6,000 years. Absent climate mitigation or migration, a substantial part of humanity will be exposed to mean annual temperatures warmer than nearly anywhere today. So, okay, so what was the point in that? Why did you show us, why did you show that, Nzinga? So just so you know that, that's a little bit of information about climate change and about the heat and in the next 50 years. And you can, this is not up for debate about climate change anymore. All the scientists are saying we're looking at things and they're happening faster and faster because of that cycle like we were talking about, pandemic, shortages, climate change, insects, weather patterns, all this stuff, it keeps creating more and more. So, we get to this point where things just become more and more dire. So let's see if I get to the next place I wanted to go. And so, one of the, there's a pretty well-known climate writer and author named David Wallace Wells that had tweeted on this article, and he said, even limiting global warming to 2°C, again, 2 Celsius, and we're talking about 2 Celsius is about 35 degrees, is that right? Aaron, maybe you can help me. I think that's pretty good, about 35 degrees. And when people talk about global warming to 2°C, they're talking about 35 degrees more above the average, mean that by 2070, roughly 1.5 billion people would have to migrate or be forced to live outside of the human climate in literally uninhabitable regions resembling today's Sahara. So that was just another piece of that I wanted to mention, and I keep getting. So, so that brings us back to what's that mean for us, and really understanding about climate change and what that means for us. And so I wanted to, so I found this one art report from the Environmental Defense Fund, and it talks, the title is New Poll, Majority of African Americans Affected by Climate Change Support Transition to 100% Clean Economy. And this was just came out March 9th. And so I'm gonna see if I can get to this a little bit and just show a little bit of this. And again, I think I have to stop and go back and go to this guy. Yeah, so maybe somebody in YouTube land can tell me a better way to do this, but this is just a really old way. I have to go out and then come back in to show you this. But again, I'm just going to show you a little bit of this report. It says new polling released today shows that a majority of African Americans across the United States are personally affected by disease and extreme weather made worse by climate change, and support a transition to a 100% clean economy to curb climate pollution. So now we know that the majority of the polluted waters in our communities and urban areas, the air, that when people want to put up factories that are spewing poisons into the air, they do it in communities of Black and brown people. You know, and so, and we already are among the highest people that deal with these high risk medical health conditions, which makes us just, which is the reason why so many of us are dying from COVID-19 because of environmental racism. So we're already suffering because of this climate change. We always deal with the brunt. We ourselves, and of course Native American people, deal with the brunt of a lot of environmental racism. But to go on, it says Lincoln Park Strategies conducted the nationwide poll. It surveyed 1,000 African Americans about their firsthand hardships with climate change and identified support for a solution to the climate crisis that is gaining traction on Capitol Hill. The poll was commissioned by Environmental Defense Fund in coordination with Moms Clean Air Force to measure the nationwide support for transition to a 100% clean economy. And I'll skip down a little bit more. The data falls right in line with what we hear from our members. African Americans are concerned about the impacts of climate change and want solutions that don't pour more pollution into already overburdened communities, said Heather Toney, National Field Director of Moms Clean Air Force. 100% clean economy is a solution that looks to ensure fair and equitable future for Black communities, and Moms Clean Air Force strongly supports legislation that moves us in that direction. So, you know, we need to, whenever we hear about factories or people kind of doing things that are sustainable, or we really need to be serious about checking with our community leaders and finding out how is that going to affect the quality of our lives and our communities. Some of the chief findings from the poll: a majority of African Americans are affected by severe heat and extreme storms that are made more dangerous by climate change. One of the reasons for that is because we live in these urban areas, all of the carbon dioxide, the heat is trapped, all of the cement, the steel, all of this stuff keeps everything hotter, and we suffer more in urban areas. 57% majority of African Americans think that climate change is getting worse. Achieving nationwide 100% clean economy is a solution to climate change that is supported by a 77% of African Americans surveyed. I was really happy to hear this. This was really great news to hear, because I don't really hear a lot of our people talking about climate change and about demanding a clean economy, changes in our systems, the ways that our government, our policies are designed. But I guess if people survey us, they agree with it. But I hope and wish that we would look at this more closely and do more of this advocating for our own health. So one of the things, like I said, we don't want to just talk about the problems. We want to talk about psychologically what we can do to improve our lives. Sorry about that. Went out a bit. Let me get back to that. There we go. So, you know, one of the things about self-sufficiency, for generations, for hundreds of years, people of African descent have been living under, for the most part, have been living under white supremacy. And part of what for white supremacy to exist and to continue to survive and is by creating systems that support it. That means educational systems, that means medical systems, political systems, justice systems that continue to reinforce ideas that keep people of African descent for the majority, keep people of African descent in a state of learned helplessness, feeling like we can't take care of ourselves. That some of us don't even want to. We want other people to take care of us. We don't, a lot of us have gotten to the point where we even, some of us believe that white people are smarter and more powerful and better, and they can handle everything. And that we need to rely on other people to save us and take care of us. Some of this kind of attitude is called learned helplessness. And so I've got a few slides, just want to go through this and talk about it a little bit. Learned helplessness is a set of pattern of learned behavior accumulated over time. Daily, and it looks like daily acts of racial violence, and that's what I talk about. I don't just say racism, because racism talks about the system is doing something to me, but I like to talk about racial violence, because when I say that somebody has been violent to me, it's personal. It's personal to me, it's personal to my friends, my family, my loved ones that are subject and victims of violence because of white supremacy and white privilege and racism and the systems of racism. And so these daily acts of racial violence and feeling that there's no rescue or support from it tears people down, tears down our sense of ability, sense of confidence that we can take care of ourselves. It reduces a person's confidence in their ability to gain mastery over events in their lives, and develops a perception of their life as having little value, and abandons responsibility for self. After repeatedly lacking control over racial violence, people begin to develop deficits such as loss of motivation, not believing that having the energy to get up and really organize and take care of ourselves, loss of cognition. I mean, when people start to feel a lack of confidence and lack of motivation and powerlessness, it begins to change your brain wiring. And you have really, it negatively impacts the way you think. Loss of emotion. You just start feeling numb to it. And it really ends up that numbing feeling or wanting to escape the pain of racial violence is one of the reasons why our people get involved, or anybody who's traumatized gets involved in negative behaviors such as substance use, unhealthy eating, gambling, sex addiction, all of these things, because we kind of lose the motivation, we don't think clearly, and we kind of become numb to all of the violence around us because we kind of lose the belief that we can change, that our lives and our conditions can change. Together, this creates what's called a sense of cognitive vulnerability. It's when a person holds errors and beliefs or patterns of thinking that increases psychological distress. So once people kind of get sucked into this idea of learned helplessness, and they just lose motivation and they just become emotionally numb to the violence that we're experiencing, and they don't even really think about it anymore. When we start to engage in activities that are not healthy for us, that's called cognitive vulnerability. Really holding on to patterns of beliefs and thinkings that increases our distress. So I mean, people know if you start trying to get into unhealthy coping mechanisms like drug abuse or gambling or anything else, binging on things, it might feel good for a minute, but after it's done, you're still left with the problems, and you have more problems on top of it because now you're physically not healthy. You're addicted to some drug or alcohol or something like that. So it only becomes an increasing cycle of problems in your life. More people are cognitively vulnerable, the more predisposed we are. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back a minute. Back in my little thing. More we are predisposed to experiencing psychological problems. So after encountering stressful experiences, cognitive vulnerability results in unhealthy responses such as faulty beliefs. Again, that's how people get to the point where they believe that, well, white people, they just seem to have it all and I don't, so maybe they're better than I am. Or you just kind of feel hopeless. Or again, you become attached, and that attachment kind of looks like, if you're familiar with what's kind of called Stockholm syndrome, where people kind of become attached to their oppressor. They fall in love with them and become dependent on them. These are some of the kind of faulty thinking that comes as learned helplessness progresses. And so we want to be here at AFN, African Freedom News, we want to be about dispelling the illusion of helplessness. We want to talk about moving from helplessness to embracing and achieving social justice. And what that looks like, is the ability to eliminate your learned helplessness and change in your life. Whoops, sorry, going backwards. Changes in your life by looking at your racial identity, embracing your racial identity, looking at your motivation for change. What is it that you need to do to get motivated? And embracing a sense of empowerment. So what do you need to do to take your power back? All of these things are what we need to do to achieve the kind of justice, the human justice, the equality, the freedom that this show is about. And as one famous man said, if you don't program your mind, it will be programmed for you. And that's where a lot of us are at right now, is that we're just go along with the go along. We just go along to get along. And we can see climate change. We can see the people dying and African people dying by the hundreds for COVID-19, and we can see the food shortages, and we see the unemployment and things coming down the pike. But we can't just freeze, and we can't just say, well, FEMA's going to help me, or somebody's going to help me, or somebody's going to come along, because you remember Katrina, right? So, that's faulty programming. If you think that somebody else is going to come along and save you. One thing just to kind of think about too in terms of empowerment is using, I'm a big proponent, I'm trying to get this out of my way so I can read it, sorry about that, of using affirmations, of getting, this is just one little skill. We're going to talk about a lot of them, but thinking about, these are some things to think about, incorporating these ideas, these positive ideas in your mind. I can accomplish anything I choose. All of these are true, by the way. You might not think they're true, but you need to question them and challenge them and come to the place where you can believe in them. I am a worthy and valuable person. I am intelligent and capable. I do my best, and my best is good enough. I easily attract money into my life and use it wisely. I deserve happiness and success in my life. I love myself and I am loved by others. And finally, my beliefs control my genes and I control my beliefs. Now that's real important, because I know I grew up thinking that, I was bound to my genes. Or if my parents had diabetes and heart disease, well, I guess it's just in my genes and I guess that's what I'm going to have too. And that's not true. Your genes actually can be turned on and off by your mind. And hopefully we'll get more into that later in upcoming shows. But my beliefs control my genes and I control my beliefs. So these are some ideas that I just wanted to share with you. I think that we need to, we at African Freedom News, we're about empowerment. We're about justice, about seeking justice, a just society. We're about having, empowered communities and families and healthy relationships so that we can not only survive these current and coming times, but that we can thrive. So I don't know if you had any comments, anything you wanted to share, Aaron, as we kind of wrap up for today.
Yeah, I have one closing statement I'd like to make. We have a saying in the prepper community that when a disaster happens, your time to prepare has ended.
Mm.
If you should get a plan together right now, discuss it with your family, start asking yourself the question, what if? Start having foresight, quit living for just today only, start looking into the future, seeing different things happen and how it's going to impact you and your family. Put a plan together, involve everyone in your family in it, try to get them to participate because that experience will be vital down the road. And again, you don't want to be out there in that last minute crowd trying to prepare because there's going to be a lot of violence. You want to already be prepared ahead so that when something happens, you've got extreme confidence and you're going to thrive through the situation where everybody else is going to be living in panic and fear. And proper mental health, having that peace of mind of knowing you're going to make it through a situation, you're completely confident you're going to make it, you're not going to be fazed by it whatsoever or affected. That's going to be vital to have that peace of mind versus living in fear and panic and not knowing what's going to happen next. So again, when a disaster happens, if you fail to prepare for it in advance, your time to prepare is ended.
Mm.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah. Words to live by, folks. Words to live by. Keep it. I think I get to my screen. So we want to really thank you for being a part of our show today. We really, really appreciate it. It's something that this work is near and dear to our hearts. And we do this for our people. We hope that you will like, share, and comment on this show. Also, our contact information is here, but we really appreciate any comments at all, any questions in upcoming shows. We will we'll try to answer questions because, if one person has a question, then there's probably a lot of other people who have that same question. So we might answer you individually, but we'll also try to answer these questions on our show as well. So Again, thank you so much. We're very excited that you took the time, and we're grateful and appreciate you taking the time to be a part of this with us. And I hope that you continue to be a part of our journey. And you all have a wonderful, safe, and peaceful day. Good night.